Right. So here we go with another Confessions podcast. Thank you for downloading another fabulous few minutes from your friends at Radio 2. We've got some good ones coming up this week. Big Four Confessions. Tonight, starring a Daft Donovan Devotee, Scary Soccer Sheep, or Fleecy Football Flock. Actually, Fleecy Football Flock is better. Pathetic Pine Pongs and Bad Bard Behaviour. I know. Here it all comes. Thank you very much indeed to Andrea who sent this one in. Thank you, Andrea. Father Simon and the wonderful collective of understanding, very forgiving grown-ups who were once children.
Yes.
That's true.
Still are.
Yep. Some more than others. My confession dates back to 1971. Good year. Someone ought to write a book about that. I'm the middle sister of three. My older sister is 4 years older than I am. My younger sister is 5 years younger. And it is she who was the reason for my dreadful misdemeanour. You must be given the background of my emotional dilemma, for it was not without cause that I committed my sin. My little sister, who shall remain anonymous for the moment, was the princess of the family. We all adored her. She was pretty, had deep blue eyes and naturally blonde hair. I, on the other hand, was described rather unhelpfully as different.
Okay.
I mean, not ugly or plain, just different. I had mousy-coloured hair and brown eyes and a bit of a tomboy. My mum decided that my hair was too unruly, and so I had my hair cut really short at the age of 10 in a pudding basin cut, and I cried when that happened. I don't think Andrea's over this at the moment. My sister, however, was allowed to keep her golden tresses, and there the envy began. At this point, I must say, I actually loved my sister. She was funny, very spirited. What I didn't hold dear was my mum's total devotion to her. She could do no wrong. I, on the other hand, was blamed for everything, for all the wrongdoings. Older sister was obviously not to blame because she was too sensible. And little sister was an angel. So as all middle siblings will know, I was blamed for every wrongdoing. In the summer term of 1971, I was 13 and a half years old. I had saved up my babysitting money and I had bought Donovan's Golden Hours album. I adored it and I sung Universal Soldier in my box bedroom. Yes, I even... She says, I strummed my guitar, which I bought for £10 for my babysitting money, and generally imagined that one day I would fall into the arms of Donovan. I loved him, and I loved his curly hair. I stroked it every night on the poster. One morning, my mum called me downstairs and explained that my little sister had been asked to take an LP to school for some project that her class was doing, and she had decided that my Donovan LP would be ideal. I mean, what? My adored Donovan album? I think not. I looked at my mum sitting in her winged armchair.
Why is that sinister?
It's like a throne, isn't it?
I don't know. Armchair,
Look
of
at you.
all things.
I suppose it's throne-like. Anyway. And then at my sister with her deep blue eyes and her sly smile encircled in mum's loving arms. What a fox. Panic took over in my head. How could I avoid this terrible event? What about my Top of the Pops LP, I suggested, hopefully, as I really didn't like it very much. You know, the one with the unnecessarily scantily clad woman on the front. No, it's the Donovan one that suits the project. We've heard it over and over, and she knows the words to some songs, came the retort in my mum's soft Birmingham accent.
I
didn't say that.
Come across?
No.
Funny.
No,
how that works.
well, I've told you I don't do that. There are only 3 that I do, and Birmingham isn't one of them. You'll be relieved to know. Think. Quick, come up with a reason why she can't have it. Oh, I said, oh, yeah. I'd love to lend it to you, but it's scratched, and the needle's jumping every time. It's not good. Well, that was a fast one. Well done me, writes Andrea. Oh, really? Says my mum, with a wily attitude. Let me have a look and I'll decide if it's any good or not. Well, I had no choice, Father Simon. No choice at all. I climbed the stairs like a dejected Daffy Duck, picked up my treasured Donovan album, slid it from its pristine white sleeve, and yes, this is the sin I committed. I took a pair of compasses from my pencil case.
What?
And I scratched it. The horror, the feeling of loss was almost too much to bear, but at least my little sister was not going to take it to school. Ha ha! It was like actually attacking Donovan himself, but it meant that when you put it on... That happened. So it was utterly useless, and Father Simon, I therefore need to beg forgiveness, not from my mum for lying, not from my sister, but from Donovan himself. Defiling his work is a heinous crime against music. I feel remorseful and have never damaged any other thing on purpose since this event. In my defence, I haven't named my little sister, who goes by the name of Dee, as she can't stand her real name because of a famous soap character who had the same name. Anyway, imagine that coming out with a name inappropriately.
Yeah.
Bad thing to do. Anyway, Andrea, thank you very much indeed. So imagine that. So just to stop her little sister getting hold of her Donovan album, out come the compasses. Scratch that. You're not having that ever. Hands off. Back off. Thanks. What do you think there, Bobby Pryor?
Well, it's difficult because if you've got lots of siblings and you have to share things, there are just some things you just don't want to share, no matter
And
how
Donovan
cute
is clearly
they are.
one of them.
Yeah, the thing is, though, the project that the little sister had to take it into school, had it been, we're going to make flower pots out of albums, you know, and bend them with heat and things like that, I could understand her going, no, I don't want to give it over. However, it might have been songs my lovely sister has passed on to me, and that would have been a lovely thing to do.
But it wasn't
But it wasn't, so she didn't get the chance. And the thing is, I think Donovan's done all right. So damage to the album, you've only really cut off your nose to spite your face. So really, it's a lose-lose situation, isn't it? Because you scratched your own album to stop your sister. I mean, you know, it could have come back in perfect order, couldn't it? It could have been okay.
I'm a middle one. I know what she's talking about.
I'm an elder one. I don't know what any of you are talking about. By the way,
Really?
yes, the elders always get all of the flack, and we have to be the responsible ones. You get to be the cute ones. Anyway, back to the point at hand. I always find that I think Andrea here has missed the opportunity to do what I always like to do, which is grab the moral high ground and then exploit it for your own ends. And what you should have done there is said, yes, of course, you can have my LP, Little Sister, and take that into school. And then if something had happened, you'd have been able to say, unbelievable, you've taken my LP and it's the only thing I love in this world and you've taken it from
actually,
me.
she could have scratched it, then handed it over,
Yeah. And then said, look at why I am the
clever.
downtrodden one. I deserve 3 Donovan LPs in retrospect.
Not so special now with your golden tresses.
With your golden hair and your high-backed armchair and your whatever else's. So I am going to not forgive, because you should have tried to exploit it for very bad reasons, like I would.
I was going to say, Matt, do your siblings still talk to you?
No.
Right, here's tonight's confession. It comes from Sharon. Sharon says, I write to you an ashamed, remorseful mother of 3 boys. I know what I did was wrong on many, many levels. We lived in a beautiful house surrounded by idyllic countryside, and we're lucky enough to have a large garden suitable for a good game of football. In the fields that surrounded the house, there were sheep. Lots and lots of sheep. All very noisy, and I often watched the farmer getting mobbed as he took bags of sheep nuts out to feed them in the field. The boys were all under 10 years old, and they loved being out in the garden. Simon, it is important to mention that the boys were proper country lads, strong, robust, fun-loving. They could earth your boat if you asked. Just made that bit up. And they were afraid of nothing except for sheep. There's probably a name for the phobia, but that's what they've got. They hate sheep. Kind of tough if you live in the countryside. The long summer holidays stretched before us, and the goalposts were erected in the garden, ready for the beginning of our football season. There was only one blot on my otherwise happy existence. I was constantly retrieving the football from the field of sheep. Simon, I don't mean a couple of times. I mean literally hundreds and hundreds of times. It became tedious and exhausting. The boys refused to jump the fence to fetch the ball because they were scared of the sheep. At this point, Simon, I was already dreading the endless trips to fetch the ball. In an attempt to reduce said trips, I embarked on an intensive training programme to improve the aim of the boys. But it failed. On the day in question, our daily routine of football in the garden was in full flow, and true to form, my rather uncoordinated eldest son kicked the ball into the field of sheep for the umpteenth time, and the familiar cry of, "Mum, can you get the ball?" rang through the hills. I took an empty coal bag and gave it to my son, and together we put some chippings from the drive into the bag. Enough so that when you shook the bag, it rattled the stones around. I told him I was fed up of fetching the ball, and that they must fetch it themselves from now on with the aid of my brand new, yet to be patented, sheep scaring device, because the coal bag of chippings, that's what I was saying was going to scare them away. I reassured my anxious son that the sheep scaring device would make the sheep run away if he shook it, and that he would be able to fetch the ball without getting chased. My number one son anxiously climbed the fence, constantly seeking reassurance that the bag of stones he was clutching would indeed scare the sheep away. I told him it would, and that all he had to do was to shake the bag. If the sheep even looked at him, then they would run away. I had taken the precaution of putting my camera in my pocket, just in case I needed it. I can't think why. Anyhow, he looked nervously towards the ball, and a few of the sheep sensed movement and looked up. My son calls to me, "Mum, the sheep are looking at me." "Shake the bag!" I call back, "Shake the bag!" Simon, he shook the bag, and all hell broke loose. The entire flock of sheep leapt as one at the sound of what they thought was sheep nuts, and grouped themselves menacingly before setting off in pursuit of the bag and therefore my son. Terror was etched in his face as he ran, yelling in no particular direction around the field. "Shake it harder!" I yelled at him. He shakes the bag more furiously. The sheep go crazy. Exhausted and traumatized, my son eventually outran them and arrived at the fence, followed closely by the sheep, and he threw himself over it. Well, here's my confession. Simon team listeners, the chippings in the bag actually had the opposite effect to what I said. This actually attracts sheep, and I knew that all along. Oddly, my son didn't find it as funny as I did. Funny that. And, of course, his ball was still in the field.
Yeah.
Oh, well, never mind. He's now 25 years old and still terrified of sheep. But I seek forgiveness, and not just because of the prank I played, but also for taking the photos and repeatedly getting them out to show his friends. I also seek forgiveness for still finding myself crying with laughter at the memory of that day. Well, callous and harsh, some might say, but anyway, if you live in the country, that's the kind of rules that you have to live by, and if that's what Sharon wants to do, so just obviously don't try that at home. If you're crossing a field of sheep, don't shake what they might feel to be sheep nuts at them.
Obviously, don't do that, kids.
Yes, don't try that at home. Anyway, what do you think of that, Sister Bobby?
Well, I'm kind of ashamed of myself because it was absolutely hilarious. But your mum is meant to protect you, so I'm a little bit confused at this one. I mean, what you should have done, of course, is had a saucepan and a wooden spoon to chase them away, because sheep generally are frightened. They don't generally come looking for you. Cows, it's a whole different situation and much more dangerous. But sheep are generally...
And snakes, that's different as well.
Snakes generally don't group in a herd and come for you.
Bear Grylls
and hippos.
The thing is, though, I thought she taught him a valuable lesson, and this is why I'm probably going to forgive her, because really, he should always question what someone tells you, even your mum. So you're forgiven for that. You taught him a valuable lesson.
And ostriches, they're different as well. Fear of sheep is a vinophobia. Thank you very much indeed.
Of course
so that's what they had.
Yes. Well,
but did they get any sympathy from Sharon? They didn't, no.
No. Well, I think I know what's going on here. I think that basically Sharon lost patience with these three boys who, despite the fact that they have this phobia of sheep, continue playing football next to a field full of sheep and then kicking the ball into said field. And I think what she was doing was the best way to sort of address this kind of phobia was this sort of immersion phobia. You know, when you're afraid of something,
thrown in at the deep end.
Absolutely.
Desensitisation.
There you go. And so she was thinking, I'm going to do a bit of desensitisation with these boys, get them surrounded by sheep, and that way they won't be afraid of sheep anymore. Didn't happen, because apparently he's 25, still can't stand sheep. But, you try once, try it again, maybe. So I'm going to say definitely forgiven, because she was trying her best to get this irrational fear of sheep out of him.
And taking photographs and having an awful lot of fun at her son's
win-win for everyone there, really, wasn't it?
It's confession time, and tonight's comes from Emma. Thank you, Emma. The Tale of the Loathsome Pine, worth repeating.
Yeah.
Simon of the Collective, this guilty secret has been eating away at me for 34 years. That's a lot of eating. Cast your mind back to 1980 and you'll find me, a sixth former at grammar school, same school of the budgie escape that you mentioned in the confession a while back. Age 17, my parents went away for a weekend holiday, leaving me, an only child, in charge of the house. Which 17-year-old hasn't been happy with that scenario, I ask you?
None.
Did I throw a wild party whilst my parents were away? No, I didn't. Did I invite my boyfriend over? No, I didn't. Did I invite a girlfriend over for the night, planning to watch good films and drink cider? Well, which 17-year-old hasn't done that? In fact, I believe my dad even bought us the cider.
Aww.
Which is a nice thing to do, I think.
Yeah, I'm sure that's fine.
It's 1.2%.
Okay.
It's that kind of
Oh, really?
family cider.
Then there's family cider there. It's
It's
fine.
like a building trust situation, isn't it? You can have one bottle between you.
She might mean apple juice.
Yeah, I think that's what she meant, actually. I think we just make that change.
I think my his dad even bought us the apple juice.
Yep.
Now, one vice I had at the time, and which 17-year-old didn't, was, I'm afraid to say, smoking. And obviously, this is not a practice which I endorse now.
We don't condone this,
No.
kids.
Which my parents would have disapproved, being non-smokers themselves. Smoking at home, even in the garden, was forbidden, but hey, they were away. So my friend and I curled up on the armchairs in the parental lounge with apple juice, more or less chain smoking whilst watching films until the wee small hours. The place is going to stink. Following day, my friend returned home, and this is where I hit problems. I just thought that opening the windows and leaving some nail varnish open around the place would eliminate the stale tobacco smell. Which 17-year-old hasn't tried that? I haven't tried that. Have you tried that?
No.
No, have you tried that?
Never.
No, see, no one has tried that. Anyway, it didn't work. The following morning, the day of the parents' return, the room still smelt like a pub. Different times. In a panic, I rushed to the local corner shop and bought a bottle of cleaning product. A pine-smelling powder that I could shake all over the carpet and then vacuum up. The bottle assured me it would deal with all sorts of stale smells, including tobacco. So I vigorously shook and vigorously vacuumed. Which 17-year-old hasn't done that? Well, the bottle spoke true. It did indeed deal with the tobacco smell, but unfortunately the room now smelt like a pine forest. I had actually used the whole bottle. Not only that, but I had spread it thickly, and there was slight powdery residue showing at the edges of the carpet, especially around the door, and I couldn't vacuum it up. The parents were due back in 2 hours, so now I had to think up a story to explain the smell of the pine forest. This is becoming a Yellow Pages ad right here.
Yeah.
I don't know whether I've mentioned that my father can be like a forensic scientist on some days, so I knew I would have to hide any incriminating evidence. I buried the cigarette butts in the garden. I mean, which 17-year-old, etc. I think that's unwise. But knew that the pine-flavoured powder bottle would be noticed if I left it under the sink. The powder marks on the carpet would be noticed, so I poured out the powder into a large old jar in the bathroom. Aye, and hid the bottle in an old cereal packet in the dustbin and thought up a story. Well, we've all done that. Anyway, I was just in time. Parents returned home relaxed and happy, and the house was spotless. Welcome home, I greeted them and added, I need to warn you, there's a strong smell of pine forest in the lounge.
Yeah.
What happened is, Dad, I bought some bath salt powder from town, and it was going cheap. It was in a plastic bag, and I took it into the lounge with the rest of the shopping, and the bag split, which is obviously why it was reduced. I managed to save it. It's in that old jar upstairs, but a lot was on the carpet. I did my best to hoover it up, and I think I got most of it, but there is a strong smell of pine forest in the lounge. I'm very sorry about that. Anyway, my parents went into the pine forest scented lounge, and they looked and they sniffed whilst I held my breath, but to my relief, no trace of cigarette smell remained. They laughed and said, no worries, the smell will dissipate in time, which it did. I was very relieved. Which 17-year-old doesn't know the feeling of that relief when they've got away with something? However, some weeks later, I came down to breakfast to find my dear mother somewhat unhappy. She was plastering herself in ointment. Emma, dear, she said, remember that bath powder you got cheap? I wouldn't use it if I were you. I put it in my bath last night, and it's made me terribly itchy, and it didn't froth or lather at all. I tried rubbing it with a brush, but
Oh, what?
that must be why they were selling it off cheap. To my shame, says Emma, I said nothing. I said nothing. Now, etc.
Yes, we've been there.
Yes, but I realised that this argument will no longer wash with or without pine bath powder. My poor mother had bathed in carpet cleaner, and to this day does not know why it was all an itchy and a scratchy affair. So, friends, I beg forgiveness for both causing my mother an itchy night and defaming the corner shop which sold the bath powder. My mother refused to shop there ever again. On principle, if you're going to sell substandard product, I'm not going there again. Anyway, well, you can understand it, but, if you pass off cleaning product as bath salt, therein lies the problem, which I suspect Bobby is going to come down on you like a ton of bricks. Here we go.
Well, the thing is, I think this is a perfect opportunity for many, many, many lessons learned. The thing is, you knew you shouldn't have been smoking. So really, the payoff and all your desperation to try and get rid of the smell is the kind of lesson that you needed. Don't do this again. It was silly. You thought you could get away with it. And here's your payoff. And look what's happened. Now it smells worse than the cigarettes and you're going to have to hide it. It involves more lies. And, the more we lie, the more we lie, the more we lie. And you've basically had to live with this for 34 years.
She's been living in a cesspit of depravity.
Well, pine smelt depravity, but you gave your mum an allergic reaction. And I think that's really sad for your mum. But the greatest thing you've given your mum, so you've confessed, is you don't smoke anymore. So I think the very fact that you don't smoke anymore, that your mum would forgive you and so on, the thing that you'd given up smoking, which is good for you generally.
I think I might have. Yeah, I'm not sure whether she has.
Did
anyway.
you embellish that?
Well, obviously, I'm just saying this is a ridiculous thing to do, and it's a very bad thing, and you must never try it at home. And I'm sure that Emma, that's what she means.
Yes.
The thing is,
yeah. Oh, you're still on?
Yeah, I'm still on.
Go on.
I haven't finished yet. Just wait. You shouldn't smoke in the house.
That's
you
a
were
very
told.
bad thing.
Unforgiven.
I once had a BBC executive round to my house who smoked in my house.
Did you tell him to stand outside?
I wish I had. Anyway, what you got there, Matthew?
Excellent. Isn't it odd what you think is great fun when you're older, or when you're younger, rather? The idea that you would an evening spent smoking, watching movies is going to be. I remember the first time I was left at home alone, I ate 3 Easter eggs while watching Beverly Hills Cop. It was like the last days of Rome.
That's all right.
It was, yeah. I thought if adulthood is anything like this, it is going to be a scream. I love the fact that when her dad gets home, she decides to tell the whole story. That's how you spot a lie, is if there's a massive story attached to the lie. Never, when you're telling a lie, never give the whole story. Just have the story ready in case anyone asks. Little tip there for you kids.
Something you've tried in the past,
yes,
then?
Definitely, all the time. So I am going to forgive, just because of the blatant lie you told to your dad.
So it's the people's verdict then. Do you forgive Emma for this torrid tale of lies and poison?
Yes. What, poison?
Yes.
Really? The carpet? Well, she wasn't ingesting it, so...
Yeah, but she let her mum bathe in chemicals.
Well, that's what bath salts are.
Okay. Tonight's Shakespearean confession, which comes from... It's called Bard to the Bone, by the way. Just worth repeating that, I think.
Yeah, well done.
Roger has sent in tonight's confession. Thank you, Roger. Dear the most wonderfully gracious Father Simon and the ever so adorable, hey, you're looking mighty fine, Holy Collective. A little while ago, I decided to finally bite the bullet and retire early from teaching. I've enjoyed my career in the main, but I must say being surrounded all day by the abusive, scruffy, unhygienic and badly behaved has just about worn me down. But enough about the staff. Hey! Most of the children were lovely, and they gave me a great send-off when I left. One of my hobbies outside of school was the theatre, and I was a very enthusiastic member of a small drama club in our little village just outside Rugby. But shortly after my retirement, my wife also retired, and I took the big decision to downsize and move a few miles north to a little place just outside Solihull to be closer to our children and grandchildren. We found a lovely place that has a village feel about it, fun runs, fetes, nosy interfering neighbours, that kind of thing, plus a pub where everyone knows your business and a highly regarded amateur dramatic company. Shortly after we'd made the big move, I noticed an advert in the local paper for auditions at the local theatre for King Lear. This was great news. I could get myself acquainted with the local thespians and redeem myself for my awful performance in Macbeth when I was in Rugby. For the next 2 weeks, I read and reread the play, memorising sections and getting engrossed in the wonderful words of William Shakespeare. On the night of the audition, I decided to wear an outfit of all black and lightened my beard with hair with talcum powder. I thought this might give me an air of mystery and impress the director of the play. When I got there, It looked as though people had come from far and wide for the audition. We all had to stand up and give a short account of ourselves. I mumbled that I'd been in a theatre group in rugby and had done Macbeth. I sat down to silence. I didn't stand a chance of getting a part, but I thought at least I might get to know some people anyway. Then I was asked to read for King Lear himself. Amazingly, the speech the director asked me to read was the very one I had taught for GCSE only a couple of months previously. I had heard every Year 11 boy and girl read through this speech at least 5 times. It was ingrained in my memory. What the hell, I thought. I put the script down and recited it off by heart. You could have heard a pin drop afterwards. And that was that, I thought, until 2 days later when the phone rang. It's the director of King Lear, Doreen. And Doreen informed me that she had been very impressed with my audition, and she said very excitedly, "I want you to be my Lear." Because they all talk like that.
Yes, they do.
What? I couldn't believe this. I'd been really awful. I'd have to turn it down. It was a massive part, even for a professional actor. All I would do is make a complete fool of myself. What could I possibly say? Well, the answer to that is, I'd love to do it. I can't wait to start. And so we rehearsed and rehearsed and rehearsed. After a few of these rehearsals, I got the feeling that the rest of the cast were a bit miffed that I was cast in the major part. And to be perfectly honest, I was baffled too, because I'd only just joined, and let's face it, apart from memorising King Lear's speech, I was awful. It was at this point that I realised that the rest of the cast were also making sarcastic comments about my acting ability, and that when I got nervous, sounded a bit like a pirate. Now, the truth is I have got a slight Cornish twang to my voice, and that gets a little more obvious when I'm nervous or drunk, and this was turning out to be hellish. However, one thing was for certain, I would look the part. I grew my beard even more and talcum powdered that and my hair. My wife made me a beautiful cloak that really gave me a regal appearance. This cloak went down to the ground and enabled me to just wear tights underneath to try and keep cool when I got hot and flustered. That is significant, by the way.
Oh, good.
And then came the performance itself. To be honest, it got off to a bad start. On the first night, overcome with nerves, sweating profusely and without my glasses, I tripped over a discarded sword in the wings, gambled onto the stage and sprained my ankle in the process. I then proceeded to read my lines standing slightly hunched with a very noticeable pirate accent. I remember as I lurched off after delivering my lines, a distinct tittering ringing out through the audience. On one of the nights, I actually went on still wearing my spectacles. And the sprained ankle I sustained on the first night got progressively worse as the production went on, and I had to adopt a hunched hobble. One of the hardest parts of my role was the big climax. I had to enter stage left carrying the dead body of my favourite daughter, Cordelia. Now, I'm not a strong man, Father Simon, and the lady who played Cordelia was, shall we say, no stranger to a fish supper and a few snacks just before. She was only 3 years my junior, but imagine that being the director's sister-in-law might have been instrumental in her getting the part. Anyway, we rehearsed time and time again. We rehearsed this entrance and it worked really well, even with my awful acting. It was a sombre end to one of Shakespeare's greatest tragedies. On the last night, we had a full house and my stomach was even more upset with nerves than normal. Also significant. Just before I was to carry a dead Cordelia on for the last scene, I had to dash to the loo. The toilet was over the other side of the stage, so I had to run, or hobble fast, round to the back of the stage, do my business, and then dash back in time to make my entrance. I got back to hear my cue line, I hoisted Cordelia up in my arms and bellowed my lines. As I walked on, fortunately I can do pirate. Knowing that this was my final performance made me even more nervous than usual, and unfortunately I spoke the lines in the style of Long John Silver, which sounded a bit like this: "Howl, oh you men of stones, had I your tongues and eyes I'd use them so, that heaven's fault should crack, she's gone forever." So she be. At this point, I noticed a discernible titter that was coming from the audience. Something was not quite right, and it wasn't just my lines. It was then I felt a cooling breeze behind me, and I realised that in all the rush I'd managed to stuff my cloak down the back of my tights. I started to panic and sort of edged myself so I was facing the audience whilst rubbing against some of the scenery, trying to stretch and shuffle and get the cloak out of my tights. I was still delivering lines, albeit in a pirate style, but concentrating on this, I accidentally let go of Cordelia and sent her crashing to the ground. In doing so, she reached out and grabbed the front of my cloak, pulling me on top of her in a heap. This in turn whacked my beard so much that talcum powder went flying into the air, causing the dead Cordelia to sneeze repeatedly. I was really nervous now, and as I tried to extricate myself from this compromising position, I inadvertently let out an extremely long, loud, rasping break of wind that echoed throughout the theatre, to much amusement from the seated audience. But frankly, Father Simon, I was clearly mortified, and I picked myself up gamely and carried on, even when the Duke of Albany wrinkled his nose and wafted his hand in front of his face. Pack that in, Albany. Fortunately, there were only a few short speeches that followed before I laid down and died, and the curtain came mercifully down to put me out of my misery. At the after-show party that night, I could tell by the barbed asides that I would never be called upon to act there again. So at the end of the night, and vowing to never step foot in the theatre again, I wandered over to the ever-loud and drunk Doreen, the director, you remember, to ask why she'd cast me in the play in the first place. "Darling," she said, slightly slurred, while simultaneously touching her toes, "it was the review of Macbeth. I wish I'd never read the thing." Now, I must say I was slightly puzzled, Father Simon. No one ever reviewed our shows at our village hall. We were lucky if we had an audience most of the time. So when I got home that night, I searched rugby and Macbeth on the internet. And there it was, Macbeth, tour de force in bold letters. Glowing review, 5 stars. And there were dozens of comments from people who'd seen the production and had loved especially the towering performance of Roger Davis in the titular role. Unfortunately, what Doreen hadn't noticed was that although my name is also Roger Davis, it's spelt with an E. Also, the review was for the performance of Macbeth in the main theatre in Rugby Town, and not our effort in the little village hall 12 miles away in the middle of the Warwickshire countryside. So this is what Doreen had read, and that was how I got the part of King Lear. So, Father Simon, I don't wish to ask for forgiveness from Doreen, the drunken director, Smarmy Michael, the heavy lady playing Cordelia, nor from the rest of the cast of King Lear, who quite frankly looked down their noses at me from that night on. But I would like to ask forgiveness from the audiences, who not only witnessed my awful acting, but I am shamefaced to say, listened in horror to an enormous involuntary trump, which was not in the original, as written by William Shakespeare, Esquire. Hard to the bone indeed. Well, you see, he just thought he was going to play like a spooky tree or a third spear carrier. He ended up with the big part. What do you say there, Sister Bobby?
Well, it sounds like Richard III cross pantomime, actually. That's what it sounds like. And I feel sorry for Doreen, because she really did take a risk on the new boy. And of course, all that glistens isn't gold? I don't know which Shakespeare play that's from. Is it glistens or glisters?
All
that glisters is not gold. I don't know where it's from. So she obviously saw all those great reviews, took a risk on him, and I feel sorry for Doreen, really. But I don't have to apologise for the audience, I think, because the audience had a fab old time. They probably had the best night at this amateur dramatic show than they've ever had. I really do think so. So I don't think the audience needs forgiven, but I feel sorry for Doreen, really. Not forgiven. Okay, what about you, Noel?
Gosh, what a roller coaster! I mean, there are references to a windswept heath, and that definitely wasn't it, in every sense. A poldark Lear with a limp. I don't know. I mean, not his fault though, was it? That was the point. You're going to get every
literary reference you can think of in this.
It wasn't his fault. You know, so my only worry is if he still lives in that village, he might not be able to go to that pub again, particularly if the lady with the fish suppers is in it.
All the nosy interfering neighbours.
Yes. So, Rog, I am going to forgive you, but you're going to need it from a lot more people than us, I'll tell you.
My guess is that he's living in Dorridge. I don't know, I'm just guessing, but that could be a small village outside Solihull. What do you say there, Matt?
Well, in a way, this is Doreen's fault, really, isn't it? Because Doreen should have spotted that he wasn't the same Roger that she thought he was. When they were having rehearsals, she should have realised, actually, this bloke isn't very good, and should have chosen a different Lear. And all these other actors who were all moaning and complaining and making their snide comments, where are they now? Nowhere. And where are you with this amazing memory of playing King Lear and the trump in front of the audience? And I also think that there would have been a huge amount of box office potential in this particular production if they'd carried on with you and your tights. So I am going to forgive.
Well, they were this week's confessions. Very good. Did you forgive anybody? I suspect you forgave everybody this week because you're that kind of listener. If you have a shadowy secret, if you have a confession that you'd like to send to me that we could read out, and it's as good as one of those or maybe better, confessions@bbc.co.uk. We have our own email address. More in a week. All the best of the week is also cut up and nicely placed on the iPlayer for you. Author Mallory Blackman was in on Monday. Jim Knockty was in on Wednesday, both talking about their new books, 1968 in Paris and a bit of Othello in Space. That's what we got with them. A fabulous Tuesday on Tuesday. On Thursday, Nigel, in full Shakespearean costume, offered us an Elizabethan banquet for our Shakespearean special. Anyway, all the details on our Ready To page. And if you got this far, thank you very much indeed for staying right to the bitter end. You could tweet me saying, "Exit pursued by a bear," and I'll know you really mean it. Thank you.